Prison is a place for criminals to be housed as they work to rehabilitate their lives and better themselves for the future. While many criminals prepare for their life outside of prison, others seem perfectly content with living in their cell and becoming incredibly dangerous, even behind bars. But before we begin, be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. This is a guy who loves to instill fear in everyone he passes by. Jason Barnum is an inmate who, in his younger years, decided to tattoo his face to look like a demon. Though he didn't stop there. After his face had been tattooed, he requested to have his right eyeball tattooed as well. Yes, the entire eyeball. While there is certainly nothing wrong with getting a few tattoos, Jason has a criminal record that mirrors his terrifying appearance. As of 2012, Jason had at least 14 prior convictions. However, he appeared in court in September of that year after he was involved in an attack against an Alaskan police officer that resulted in the officer being seriously injured. Jason, 39 years old at the time, appeared in court yet pleaded guilty to all charges. In response to his cooperation throughout the trial, Jason was given just 22 years in prison, as well as the chance at parole after serving the majority of his sentence. Chief Mark Mew of the Anchorage Police Department spoke about Jason, saying, "I'm going to stick my neck out there and state the obvious. I'd like you to take a look at Mr. Barnum. He has the right to do this to himself and to express himself. We can't sentence him for that, but I think we can consider a guy's attitude and his behavior. I think Jason Barnum decided a long time ago that his life was about being hostile to people." Jason replied and said, "I'm humbled by what the chief said. I was out there pretty much going crazy." He added that he had a difficult time finding work outside of the prison system because of his beautiful face. Thankfully, this criminal is no longer walking the face of the earth, having paid the ultimate price for his crimes in February of 1994. Andrei Chikatilo, better known as the Red Ripper or the Butcher of Rostov, is a man who terrorized the streets of Russia, claiming the lives of at least 52 women and children between 1978 and 1990. His crimes took him all around the country of Russia, wreaking havoc everywhere he went. The details of his crimes are far too graphic to delve into, but he's known for being one of the most brutal and heartless criminals in the history of mankind. He was taken to trial in 1992, being convicted for his crimes in October of that year. However, the Supreme Court of Russia overruled the verdict and alleged that the courts did not have sufficient evidence to convict him of at least 9 of his supposed 52 victims. Regardless, these 9 cases did not save him from facing capital punishment. His life was taken from him in February of 1994, putting an end to his reign of terror. Peter Manuel was just a 31-year-old man when he was arrested and convicted of taking the lives of 7 people over just 2 years. His final set of victims was an entire family, whom he claimed in their home. After the attack, he continued living in the family's home for several days, continuing to take care of their pet cat. He eventually went to trial in 1958, but shocked the entire courtroom when he fired his lawyer on the spot and decided to represent himself. This rather expectedly didn't go well for him. He alleged that he didn't take the life of the family, but rather the father of the family did. He claims that the father of the family then took his own life after the attack had concluded. While the judge was notably impressed by Peter's ability to handle himself in court and maintain his composure, he was still found guilty. There was far too much evidence stacked up against Peter for his defense to have stood a chance. He was sentenced to be hanged, and just before the trapdoor dropped, he stated, "Turn up the radio and I'll go quietly." From 1989 to 1990, Eileen Wuornos is known to have taken the lives of 7 men, all by a single shot delivered at point-blank range. While working as a street worker, Eileen claimed that each of these men assaulted her in some form or another, insisting that these attacks were conducted in self-defense. She did her best to create a false narrative throughout the trial, though the jury eventually decided that she was guilty, and sentenced her to capital punishment on 6 different charges. Eileen is now regarded as one of only a few well-known female serial criminals in the world. Throughout her trial, Eileen was regarded as having been completely psychotic. Mental health experts believe they suffered from several personality disorders. Regardless of this, she was still considered to be sane. She was processed through the prison system and her fateful day eventually came. Prior to her leaving this earth, she stated, "I'd just like to say that I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. Like the movie, big ship and all, I'll be back." Thankfully, Eileen's prophecy doesn't seem to have come true. Let's hope it stays that way and Eileen's years of criminal activity are behind us. Peter Curtin was a German man known for taking the lives of at least 9 individuals and attempting to take the lives of at least 30 more. He's most often known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf. This is because on many occasions, he would attempt to drink the blood of his victims. Peter grew up in a home with 13 other siblings. His father was known to have beaten his mother and violated his daughters quite frequently. Because of this, Peter often ran away from home and claims to have taken his first life when he was just 9 years old. With most of his victims, he would sexually assault them or beat them, living up to the example his father had set for him. He was eventually captured and taken to court, at which point he was convicted and sentenced to capital punishment. Peter was widely considered to have been one of the most dangerous criminals in his area at the time. Thankfully, police were able to cut his crime spree short, though Peter had already inflicted endless pain on countless families across the country. While his days are finally over, his impact remains on the friends and loved ones of his innocent victims. Richard Cobb was just 18 years old when he committed his first crime, a crime worthy of capital punishment. He was a high school dropout who, along with an accomplice, robbed a convenience store and abducted 3 people who worked at the store. Richard stole one of the workers' cars and drove the group to a pasture where he violated them and attacked them. He took the life of the male worker first, leaving the 2 females remaining. Though in a strange turn of events, he left the females in the field, assuming they would pass away naturally after he left, though this was thankfully not the case. After he fled from the scene, one of the women regained consciousness and managed to run to a nearby home and report what had just happened. Police arrived immediately and located Richard, taking him in for questioning. He was sent to trial and was quickly convicted of the crimes, being sentenced to capital punishment as a result. Just before he passed from his injection, he uttered, "Life is death, death is life. Life is too short to harbor feelings of hatred and anger." He shocked the room when he thanked the warden for removing him from this world. The onlookers say that he showed no signs of remorse up until the moment he passed away. Jeffrey Dahmer was yet another American serial criminal who committed unspeakable acts against young men and boys. Jeffrey was one of the world's most despised humans at the time of his reign. He carried out vicious, violent attacks against innocent victims and seemingly showed no remorse for his actions until his trial began. What separates Jeffrey from many other criminals is that he was not satisfied with simply taking their lives. He would continue to use their bodies for pleasure after they had passed away, proceeding to consume some of his victims. When police finally located Jeffrey and entered his home, they could not believe the grim scene that they were met with. Dahmer was arrested in 1991, and though he was clinically proven to have been deeply affected by schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder, he was still considered to be legally sane at this trial. He was then convicted of all 15 crimes as a result and given 15 life sentences in prison. Dahmer used his time in prison to his advantage. It's been reported by several of his inmates that Jeffrey was, generally speaking, a nice guy. He spent hours each day bettering himself and even sought help from a local church to turn his life around. Jeffrey became a Christian while in prison and repented for his crimes. He was baptized and became a member of the non-denominational Church of Christ. His former prison mates say that from this point forward, Jeffrey was always playing jokes on the other members of the prison. In one particular instance, he took chicken bones from a meal and covered them in ketchup, hiding them in a place that would startle the other inmates when they were discovered. He would then sit back in his bunk and laugh as his jokes played out. While some of the other inmates found his actions to be quite funny, others were not so easily amused. When Jeffrey was 34 years old, he was tasked with cleaning an area of the prison alongside another inmate. However, when the guards turned their backs on the two, the inmate attacked Jeffrey and took his life. Jeffrey passed away in prison, though members of his church insist that he was a changed man and that he had truly repented for his actions and was doing his best to become a better person, regardless of his life sentence.